Hey there and welcome to the Winchester-Nabu Detective Agency Gnome Rehabilitation Department. Here you can see our lead gnome, Gnomez Addams, needed a repair to his hat. What I'm doing in this section right here is conditioning the Sculpey Primo clay that I was using after I had already attempted to fix the hat with, you can see it's been sanded and the pieces that I had were super glued into place. I didn't realize how hard it would be to condition this clay. I made a couple of sheets that were less than a 1/4 inch thick, and all I had was this one small package. So it was pretty difficult planning out the whole process. Fortunately for me and for Gnomez, that one little square of Primo clay was exactly the right amount. I had barely a pea-size amount left over after doing just his hat. And here I'm using the Bacon Bond adhesive to make sure that the Sculpey sticks better once it goes in the oven. I should say this is the first time I've actually done anything like this. I didn't know that you could put clay over something that was already finished. And I suppose that really depends on what the object is. So I got all my inspiration from this from watching Ace of Clay, Anthony, and he did just a few videos of thrift store makeovers where he bought ugly little things, little tchotchkes from the thrift store, and he turned them into new things. Most of the Ace of Clay channel, though, really is about his original characters and things from creepypasta, and also just recreations of other things, but making them scary, like Disney princesses and things like that. But this technique here that I learned about using Bacon Bond and Sculpey over something else all came from him. A little background on Gnomez Addams here. He joined us, I believe, in 2018, and it was our second year of having investigations with Gus and Oliver. That's where the Winchester-Nabu name comes from. It's Oliver Queen Winchester and Burton Guster-Nabu. They are the cat detectives that are the stars of the case files at catdetectivecases.com, and I write about them every single week. So if you are curious as to what kind of relationship we have with this particular garden gnome, that's a good place to start. We have 2 other gnomes as well, Gnome Chomsky and Sherlock gnomes. Gnomez here has a personal feud with some of the squirrels. He was attacked, by Jessica Walnuts a couple times, many times, in fact. They've had just a thing going on where they're always going at each other. But the largest attack that caused the most damage, I should say, came from a squirrel named Neil Greysuch, who's kind of a jerk. So that was all part of one of our stories, discovering that Gnomez was damaged and tracking down who did it. Here we go into the oven. So he came out really good, and I was so impressed, and really just impressed that I had the confidence to even try this, because I figured if he explodes in the oven, I just didn't know what I was going to do. But the convect bake oven really helped. First of all, he barely fit in there. As you saw, I had to take out every rack and get him to the lowest part that I could. Here he is after he's cooled down, and you can see all of the scratches and things on the rest of his body. Now that picture that just went up there was what he originally looked like. I believe it's the Alpine Corporation that was the original manufacturer. So I do come back to that as a reference, but not really as often as you'd think, because it's pretty easy to tell that he's got a blue tunic, that he's got white hair, and his pants were a dark green and his boots were black. I mean, it was a very simple thing. So one of the things that I did change, besides now repainting this hat red, because like I said, the Sculpey Primo was a purple color, but it did take a couple coats. It dried really well. But I'm pointing out the bluebird there because that's not what our eastern bluebirds look like. So if you see in the background, I have a reference photo that I took, and our bluebirds have rosy chests. So I started with white and then built up layers, adding a little bit of pink, like the very little bit of red at first to make it a rose shade of some sort. And then I started adding more vibrant colors. I probably should have waited longer between colors, but I didn't have the patience for that. I think it came out really well anyway. Here you can see that I also repainted some of the blue on the bird, well, all of the blue on the bird, just to make it a little bit more vibrant. It looks pretty good. I did also attempt some dry brushing to get that vibrancy of the rosy breast down, but I actually liked it better with more coloring on it. So there, my hand was in the way. I don't know how people film themselves working, but in the end, I think it came out really good and looks like an Eastern bluebird. At some point, I completely repainted his tunic there with blue and black, and actually there were two different shades of blue and black. I guess I didn't record it, but anyway, here I am applying solid black to the belt, and I forgot to dry brush the buckle with the silver. Even though I had it out right in front of me, I forgot to do it. This is where I began repainting his pants, which were a dark forest green. I started with black in the shadows and creases. I suppose other people, I watch a lot of miniature people who paint, not that the people are miniature, but that they paint miniatures. And they always do the big colors first and then do black washes. But I didn't do that here. I actually started with the shadows and then did the colors lighter and lighter. Maybe that's wrong, I don't know, but it worked for at least, for this particular gnome and this project of this size. He's about 12 inches tall. And the acrylic paints that I used were nothing fancy, called Artist's Loft. Here you can see I started painting the boots a straight up black color, just like the belt, and I only filmed doing one because there was no point in watching both. So welcome to the next part of Can We Save Gnomez? Can Gnomez Addams actually survive? Here you get a good look at the damage so far after I dropped him on the way to get his final varnish. So that stuff that I'm moving around there, that's the Army Painter brand green stuff. It's the yellow and the blue goop that you knead together, and it's supposed to patch things. The problem is, on that package, there is absolutely no indication as to what the working time is. So I kneaded it and kneaded it. It gets very sticky and hard to work with. And I thought, after super gluing the big chunks of damage together, which seemed like it would be an easy fix. So after super gluing, I thought this green stuff putty would be a great way to fix it. But why was I wrong, since I had never used it before? Now, maybe somebody really skilled in it would have a much better shot, but I could not get it. I took out the same sculpting tools that I used for the polymer clay and thought, sure, that would work. But my hands, as you can see right there, just working it with my fingers, by this point, the stuff was already drying up. I guess you can add water, but I didn't know how to use it. As I said, the instructions weren't that impressive. So as I started kneading another batch of this green stuff, yeah, you saw my glove there. It just stuck to it and pulled apart. So even though you're supposed to wear gloves and be safe, I just took the gloves off. I was like, it's not helping. It's not getting me anywhere. Whatever, I can just give it a shot with bare hands and the sculpting tools. Well, then it started sticking to the sculpting tools as well. I was not having any luck with this green stuff at all. And it looks like lumpy, bumpy crap. It also gets that stickiness all over your hands, which is generally why I assume people would wear gloves. So here I was trying to break off one of the pieces that it just kept sinking and like not sitting well. It wasn't repairing well. And as I did that, other pieces on the right leg started making cracking sounds. Everything was going wrong. When the right leg cracked and shattered, those pieces were much, much smaller than the original left leg repair. So I was just at my wit's end. I gave it a shot with the E6000, and that was hilarious because my tube of E6000 had some kind of hole at the bottom of the tube, allowing air to get into it, and it was kind of congealed, so it was more like a jelly paste. I did my best trying to put some things back together, but even working with the E6000, it was laughable. And there you can see I've got blue painter's tape wrapped around the feet, and oh look, that's my silicone mat. It got stuck to the super glue. When I went to move them, the whole mat tore apart. The entire project was a disaster, and I began looking into other options like air dry clay. I've heard epoxy sculpt works well, so maybe that'll work. But until then, our dear beloved Gnomez Addams will remain inside on desk duty. I do look forward to getting him fixed someday. Welcome to part 3, where I show the progression of Gnomez Addams rebuilding. Here you see the first part of the sculpting with air dry clay. I didn't film it because I was not confident in my skills, but I did manage to rebuild his entire lower half. It's very typical for air dry clay to crack, and it did indeed happen. At first around the ankles. Those were patched, and by the next day there were new cracks, but they were much smaller, easier to patch. I can't remember why, but for some reason I applied a clear coat before all of the painting was done. The statue would not stand up. It was kind of wobbly, and it's pretty hard to tell that when none of your surfaces are level in the first place. After painting the lower body again, I had to keep adding clay like he was getting lifts put on his boots. I would let it dry and sand until he was basically good enough to stand without toppling over if I put him in just the right spot on the table. This was a messy process which required me to do a lot of cleanup and touch-ups on the upper body's paint. Then he was cleaned, the paint was retouched, and he got a final clear coat. So now you see Gnomez Addams, after his rebuild, he is remaining on desk duty, even though he can be out on the balcony during the warmer seasons. But he will not be going back to Gnome Grove with the other gnomes.